Look, I'd like to welcome everybody today. It's 9 o'clock on Friday morning, and I'd like to welcome Anthony McMahon from Gitlab. Anthony and I go back maybe, 25 years, I think?
Yeah, a long time.
Roughly. We must have been 10 or something when we both worked at HP. So Anthony and I started together at Hewlett-Packard maybe 25 years or so ago. Anthony, I went and started a business. Anthony went on to become a vice president in Hewlett-Packard in the USA, leading the notebook team and various other teams, the enterprise team. He went on to take back. I remember back in HP when you first started, we had a problem in the PC market. You went on with a couple of us to sort of build a team that ended up taking HP from number 20 to number 2 in Australia in PCs. Built a factory here, did a whole bunch of stuff. You then went to North America and built the HP direct business from 50 million to 500 million, up against Dell, who at the time was sort of the major power in the PC industry. You then came to Asia and built a business from 200 million to 1.2 billion. You had an OPEX budget of 64 mil, 1,200 employees. And then when you left HP and went to SAP, you launched the HANA database line, which went from 0 to 100 million in 18 months. Anthony's one of the best commercial guys I know. For those of you with very long memories, he was also one of the guys that launched the ANSYS Goldwing Club, the original frequent flyer. You must be having all sorts of flashbacks with Virgin crashing at the moment.
Scary.
I'd like to welcome Anthony. Anthony's going to tell us about Gitlab is one of the largest remote working, if not the largest remote working company in the world that started remote and remains remote. And so they sort of worked out how to do this long before everybody had to. He's also the guy that makes his budget every year. So I think there's something to learn from that. So he's going to give you a bit of a rundown. Mate, I'll pass it over to you if you want to share your screen when you're ready. Now we'll have Q&A as we go. Q&A, I believe, is it's enabled. So please ask questions as you go, and what we'll do is at the appropriate time we'll feed them in, and it'll be recorded later if Anthony's okay with that. We'll go from there. Fantastic, mate. Take it away. Thank you.
Look, thanks, Mike, and thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I got reacquainted with Mike at the beginning of the year, and really fascinated to see all the work that's happening with Main Sequence Ventures. So exciting for me as well to have the opportunity to present to everyone. I'm the regional director for Gitlab. This is not a pitch about Gitlab. For those of you that may know about Gitlab, if anyone's involved with software development, very simply, what Gitlab does is we're a single application for the entire software development lifecycle. So anyone that's involved in developing software knows that there's lots of tools, lots of silos, lots of handoffs, lots of user interfaces just to get an application from kind of idea to code or code to cloud. And what Gitlab does is does that in a single application. So kind of think about what the Apple iPhone did to the multiple devices we all used to carry, or think about what Microsoft Office, for those that are a bit older, did to the Office Productivity Suite, when you had point tools that were individually great, but the advantage of a bundle ended up winning in the end. So that's the premise for Gitlab. But what's more interesting that I want to cover today is GitLab's the largest all-remote company in the world. We've got about 1,300 employees across 65 plus countries. We have no physical buildings. Our CEO and founder works from his his apartment in San Francisco. Our CTO technology founder works from his home in the Ukraine. And everyone else works at their home or somewhere in the world. Across 67 countries. And so it's kind of interesting for us being the largest all remote company and now seeing what's happening with COVID. It was an opportunity for us to share a lot of the learnings that we'd had as a company when many companies were finding themselves in what we're terming suddenly remote. The premise of Gitlab is a commercial open source company. So we have a huge community of developers working on our open source offering. And Gitlab, the product, is designed for remote teams to be more productive and collaborative. So it's kind of interesting as COVID's hit, what we went immediately into a mode of was not to take advantage or maximize the GitLab brand per se, but we just went out and just shared all our best practices that we had around how you operate remotely and what we'd learned over the last 3.5 years of being an all remote company. So that's really what I want to share today. I'm going to try and spin the angle more around sales and marketing, just given my responsibility is to grow the GitLab presence in APAC and Japan. But it'll give you a sense of the culture we've got at GitLab, and maybe there's some things that you can apply to the business that you've got, whatever stage you're at. So let me just move to the next slide. I guess the question that I want to answer today is, what do you and your teams need in order to be, effectively working remote? And that effectiveness, I'm going to angle or spin a little bit more towards sales and marketing. And again, I'll leave time for questions. But I'll step you through a little bit. Okay, I've said this already. 1,200 employees plus, it's now about 1,300, 67 countries. We have 1,000 organizations that contribute and co-create with us. And we have, on a regular basis, about 2,200 contributors to the GitLab offering or product that are not employees of GitLab. We believe, and it's not just related to what's happened with COVID, but all remote is the future of work. We think it has huge advantages, and I'll talk about some of the advantages we see. And I want to make sure this update I'm giving today, this is not some of the things that I've been intrigued that you're seeing on LinkedIn now, where people are talking about all remote, and the biggest tip they're telling you is to have a pop plan on their desk, or make sure you've got bright lights above your computer screen, or that you how to prepare your office space. That's what this is about. This is about how you grow a business from 2 people to 1,300 and from 0 to 120 million ARR without a single physical office. And that's what GitLab's done. So it's all about driving operational discipline from day 0. So when you designed as an all remote company, it's far easier, to be honest, than shifting from a physical located company to a all remote or physical to a semi-remote, because there are some challenges. So I guess we've got a little bit of a head start or advantage. So I've got to factor that in, because many companies aren't designed from day 0 as remote. My advice would be, for some of you, depending on where you are in your startup journey, that having this as a premise, could be an interesting point to start from day 1. And given COVID, maybe there's no better time to think about and change the way you were thinking about your location or your physical setup strategy. There's efficiencies around what you pay people based on where they're located. So we have location factors. Obviously, it costs less to live in some countries, but we obviously make it market competitive. You save a lot of money on office costs, facilitation costs, overheads around facilities management that you can redirect into your product or your marketing or your employees. And we have a core belief that brilliant people live everywhere around the world. So, you don't need to be in a certain physical location, and the smartest people are everywhere. So they're not just in the Bay Area, or they're not just in Sydney, or they're not just in Melbourne. They're in a range of places around Australia or around the world. So here's some of the things that we've learned from our mistakes. And we have, like any good software development company, it's all about iteration and fast cycle release. So we make mistakes, but we recover and correct very quickly. A couple of things. You've really got to break old habits. So everything that we do as an organization or team, remotely or virtually, has something documented where there's IP or knowledge captured, and there's a link to that information in every communication that you have. So every customer meeting, every internal meeting, every Google Calendar, we don't use Microsoft, but every Google Calendar or calendar meeting, there's always a link to a document where minutes will be taken. We have a policy internally at GitLab that every single document by default is readable and editable by every person in the organization. And on these links, which as I share might be happy to, these will click through to the GitLab handbook, which I'll talk about in a moment. The GitLab handbook is about a 4,000 page document. I wouldn't call it a manifesto. It's literally an operating manual for how to run a remote company. And we publicly make that information available to anyone in the spirit of open source. And you can feel free to copy, extract, use, plagiarize anything there that you think might be relevant to your organization.
It's a fantastic read. It
Yeah,
really is a fantastic read.
yeah, and so the simple way to get to that, it's not on our website, it's not on our public customer-facing website, but if you go into Google and just search on GitLab Handbook and then pick any topic, sales pitch, sales commissions, territories, roadmap, any process you can imagine, you'll find it, and then you can do a search within the handbook for any other topic you might want to find. So think of it like a Wikipedia or a wiki for your company. We have a process that all Slack and team messages expire after 90 days. So Slack is not a repository for long-term memory within the organization. It's a subject matter searchable real-time information platform. It's asynchronous. It's not email. It's not to be, if you write something on Slack, the premise is don't expect a response or reply. The working assumption we have, and I'll talk about that in a moment, is that everybody's asleep. And so this idea that someone's got to respond immediately or has to jump on a call with you. And by doing that, it forces a behavior where things that you communicate must be very simple to understand and then must be able to be captured so other people that are asleep can quickly pick up where they're at. And so we've kind of got this 24/7 flow on the way the organization works. We don't have EAs to organize meetings for you. If you're a meeting organizer, you organize the meeting. And what that means is you do the invites, you set up the Zoom call, you put a pre-document on the objectives and a place to capture the meeting notes, and you put any other links that are relevant to the pre-read for that meeting. We have a term called a DRI, which is a direct responsible individual. Any topic, action, issue, project, request has a single DRI. We make sure that people's office space are comfortable. So we of course pay for some things like ergonomic chairs and other things, but that's very cheap compared to the cost of the building. And we really try and drive a whole lot of meetups and activities that are not work related. So way before COVID, we were having happy hours, coffee talks, games nights, trivia nights. We've got Slack channels about who loves cats. I mean, it's right across the board, and it's a way to get the organization connected. How we make it work. So as I said, we have this concept of a single source of truth. So any document, report, analytics, anything you show in a Google presentation must have a data source that links back to our single source of truth or our system of record. And that could be, Salesforce for customer and CRM related activity, Clary for sales forecasts. It could be our own GitLab platform where we manage projects and issues. This idea of asynchronous work. So this was a big challenge for me in migrating from a company like HP and SAP. I was very used to, if I send a message to someone and I asked an action to be followed up or something to be fixed, it happens within hours, if not minutes. That's not the way GitLab works. Now, if it's a customer related issue, then we have an urgent response. We have an escalation path. But if it's an internal topic, project, issue, we have this concept of asynchronous, which is the person can respond within a reasonable time frame, but it's their time frame, not your time frame. Now, of course, we still have deadlines, and those people know when we establish those projects that there's a deadline, but they don't have to answer me in 30 minutes or an hour. They can continue to work when they want to work. The other thing I'd say, which is very important when I came in, and as you think about how you might want to set up your remote company, if this is something you're interested in, is remote does not equal work from home. It does in the current COVID environment, but for a sales, channels, solution architect, it does not equal work from home. Remote means equals anywhere. And that anywhere for us is typically at a customer's site, at a channel partner's location, at a physical event, at a virtual event, anywhere where you can communicate and effectively with a customer, that's remote, and it's not working from home. This is the handbook I was referring to. Again, the link is there. It's iterated. So as an employee, using the GitLab technology, I can update any section of the handbook. If I think it's a better improvement to what's been communicated, I can deprecate anything that's out of date. There is an approval flow that's tracked and auditable. So my boss is the only one that can approve any changes that I make. but it's all captured. We can quickly, retrospectively roll back any change because that's the way the Gitlab technology works. If something gets posted inadvertently and my boss approves something that he shouldn't approve, it's just a single click of a button to do a rollback. At the bottom of every handbook page, there's a simple web editor that I can make those changes. So for example, I just hired a few salespeople recently. I reallocated the sales territories. I make that change in the handbook. I post it, then everyone globally knows within 24 hours where my sales reps and which territories they're covering. It's great for lead flow, lead management, because marketing doesn't have to come back and check with me. It automatically gets updated in all our workflow processes through Salesforce. And we make it public. So this is not something we hide. And that includes our 3-year technology product roadmap. And it's all about, one, being efficient. The first step for any employee before you go and ask someone a question is check if it's in the handbook. And 95% of the time, I would say you get the answer that you need. That saves a lot of internal waste of other people's time that doesn't, doesn't really happen for some other companies. So if I go back, sorry, I just saw there was a, I'm just going to go back on here, sorry. Where are we? I'll just get my Zoom back there. I just think there was a question, someone had a question around
scribes.
Scribes, yeah, designate scribes. So on every meeting, you have the option of recording the Zoom call. You let the participants know. We also have a technology called chorus.ai, which is a artificial intelligence recorder where you can record sales presentations to customers. Obviously, the customer needs to approve that. That allows anyone globally to do a text search for any communication that might be happening. So say I'm going to be doing a pitch to a telco service provider and I want to find out a little bit more information. I can search through our archives to find out anyone else that's done a pitch to a telco service provider, because I can search by that information and I can then go watch that. But the designated scribes is for every meeting or interaction of more than one person, i.e. 2, someone is assigned as the scribe to take the notes that are captured in the shared documentation. Now, you could have multiple scribes, but there's always one scribe that's always identified, and it doesn't have to be the meeting organizer. In fact, it's a culture that you'll nominate. If you're a person that doesn't have the subject matter expertise necessary for that given meeting, you want the people that do know what they're talking about doing the talking, and the people that are listening and learning taking the notes. So that's what we mean by scribes. I hope that answers the question. I mentioned before this concept of asynchronous workflow. I'm just trying to pull up the chat so I can hear what people are asking. Asynchronous workflow is this idea, just from the outset, assume when I wake up in the morning and start work, or whatever time it is, 6, 7, 8, 9, depending on what's going on that day, just assume everyone's asleep, even all the people that work for me in Australia, in Sydney, in the same time zone. So that if you're going to communicate, it needs to be succinct, it needs to be self-explanatory. You need to assume that you have a non-linear workday, that someone in maybe EMEA or US is going to answer that inquiry or question on one of the Slack channels. Yes, there's a question about Google Docs. Multiple folks can concurrently scribe. There's an etiquette around not correcting someone's typing spelling mistakes, because normally they'll find it themselves. And there's an etiquette around not typing on top of the thought bubble that they may be capturing in the document, but it's absolutely encouraged that you have multiple scribes. And I'll give you an example where it works really well. If you're having a custom meeting and there's 2 or 3 of you in a room or in a virtual room, say on Zoom or WebEx or whatever the platform is, it's really nice that when you're talking to a customer and asking qualifying questions and discovery questions and really trying to listen what they're saying, sometimes you don't have the time. I'm not a touch typist, so I don't have the time to listen and type at the same time. I will have the document open, the shared document open. 1 or 2 of my other colleagues are taking notes. It's fascinating to see sometimes that what they interpreted the answer to the question is different than what I interpreted, which allows me to then re-qualify further. but absolutely, that's expected, and it's really helpful. And it was something I've never did at HP and SAP, and now it's a golden rule that all my sales and pre-sales team work on. Any questions on that? The screenshot you see there, if it helps, this is an example of a Kanban board. For those that are in software development, it's quite common to use Kanban board. Oh, sorry, I'll go back. The Kanban board for projects and for capturing workflow around particular topics that you're trying to resolve as you're coding and developing software. This is our own technology. We use Gitlab to manage a lot of other things beyond software development. So we'll use Kanban boards to manage the marketing calendars. Each of those colored sort of little tags you see are labels that you can assign to a given issue or project, so that someone immediately gets access to the information around that topic. We use a term, an issue. Think of it like a project space, almost like the old SharePoint, but it's a condensed way where a particular issue or topic is covered, and that has a complete audit trail on any communication, documents, changes that are made. People can make comments and feedback, and immediately you have a trail on a given project of everything that's been communicated about that particular topic, and it can be used. It's great for decision making because you can see who made the decision when, and who made any changes and when, and you can't delete some of those changes. Now, another thing, as I said at the beginning, this concept of design with all remote from scratch. And again, it's harder if your companies are already down the path of a physical location. But for those of you that may be in the very early stage, then really think about what are the tools that you would need to make all remote effective. Our Batman utility belt is what you see here. It's the handbook, it's Zoom, Slack, GitLab platform itself, which I just mentioned, and then G Suite. There's a few other tools that we have available. Often, most of them are free and they're open source. We use Greenhouse for recruitment. We use Bamboo for HR. We use Captivate IQ for sales commissions. A lot of these are publicly available open source, and we find that the open source version, or the lowest tier supported version, is sufficient for an organization of our size. And that way you still get all the latest technology. It's cloud-based, but you're not paying crazy licensing fees. And that's also important in a startup environment when you're trying to conserve your investors' capital. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I'll move on. So
there is one there in the Q&A. Sorry, yeah. So I'll spot these things. You don't have to. Does the synchronous workflow slow things down? If somebody's blocked on a problem they need help with, what happens there?
Yeah, look, it's definitely a risk, and occasionally I can tell you I've been frustrated. So the answer is yes, there's risk of that. The flip side of it is it drives a level of thoughtfulness and specificity around what information you're seeking and asking, and how dependent are you really on that person to contribute at that point in time. So there will be some instances. Asynchronous goes out the door the moment it's a customer issue or a customer escalation or a customer response, but internally it is something you need to get used to. But there's a whole lot of advantages where I would have, in the old way of working, or say at SAP, gone to the person I thought had the answer and was pounding and chasing them, and only to find out they actually had no idea. And behind the scenes, that spun up a huge amount of work effort to try and find the person or people that actually knew something about a given topic or issue. And then they get spun up, and then all of a sudden there's this cascading through email and other activities that have created a huge amount of work that I'm not visible to. What happens in GitLab is a lot of those things are posted in certain Slack channels, and anyone globally can contribute and comment on that thread. And very often the answer you're looking for comes from someone that you either didn't know or didn't expect. And so it turns out to be faster than the path of chasing the person you thought should know. So that's been an observational learning. The other thing is, like I said, the handbook, and you know, it's very painful when I first came in and I had to get my head around it. The number of times the answer I got was, it's in the handbook. And I can tell you, when you're a senior executive that's come from, you know, I don't know, running a 300, 400, $1 billion company, and you normally ask someone to find out an answer, normally the answer isn't go find out yourself. So I had to adjust to that. But unfortunately, as I said, 95 to 98% of the time, they're right. It's as simple as a Google equivalent search, and I get the answer without bothering anyone. So that's something that's been really interesting. Hope that answers. We also have, funnily enough, we have a head of remote. That's his title. We didn't start this title with COVID. He's been in the role for a couple of years. We've done a huge amount of communication to our customers and publicly since COVID. We created, which is on the next page, which I'll share, is the remote playbook, which is publicly available. If you go to GitLab handbook all remote, or you just type in allremote.info on the web, on your whichever search engine you use, that's available for download. And that's a lot of the information I've shared with you here in a bit more detail. So feel free to access
Anthony,
that.
just one quick question. You mentioned before Greenhouse was one of the products you use. Captivate IQ, was it?
Yeah, so Captivate IQ is for sales commissions. Greenhouse is for recruitment. Bamboo is for HR. It's not to be confused with Bamboo from Atlassian.
We have to do something about their search results, because all I got was Atlassian.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll paste those on the channel.
Some of these are smaller companies. We use Clary for a better UI and sales forecasting dashboard. Clary's a data intelligence and analytics application that sits on top of Salesforce data. We obviously use Salesforce, which we can't get away from, for our CRM and our sales management. And we use Okta. So Okta is, you know, and you can use whatever single sign-on platform you want, but Okta is what we use, and Okta is fantastic for really simplifying the access to the application suite that we've that we've pulled together in an all remote world. Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I see David's having some issues getting access to the all remote. Maybe not try the link.
I'll sort it out for you, mate.
Yeah, maybe not try the link here, David. Just go physically out to the web and search up GitLab allremote.info, and you'll be able to download the playbook. Look, the other thing for us is it's also very important for us to track and share what interactions we're having with the handbook. And if, sorry, I'll go back. So trying to head there. So that little slide, graph that you see with the bubbles and the visits on one axis and engagement time on the right axis, you see out of all the
camera. Yep, that's better. Cool.
Can you see it?
Yep. No, I can see your face now. We saw your stomach for a minute.
Sorry. On that, that's just part of the tracking we do. So out of all the information that's available on our GitLab website and handbook, the remote playbook has been by far the most downloaded piece of content and the most viewed pages, way ahead of everything else in terms of total visitors and time spent. I think to date we've had more than 16,000 downloads of the playbook. The playbook gets iterated and updated frequently, so it's constantly being improved. But it's also important for us to track. We also do a lot of things that are very strange compared to other companies around the transparency. So every time we release a product, we release on a monthly schedule. So we do releases for the GitLab application platform every 30 days on a set day on the 23rd of every month. We release. We do a post-mortem release from all our product engineers, where we evaluate quite rigidly and quite brutally where we got it right and where we got it wrong. And we actually record that Zoom call on the release postmortem and publish that on YouTube under our unfiltered channel. So GitLab's got an unfiltered channel, and we even publish our CEOs, what they call Ask Me Anything. It's called an AMA meeting. And all that information is publicly available for anyone to look at. You might get bored by it, but it's really great for me when there's meetings that are going on. I can really just do a quick search and see if I've missed anything. And often people will tell you, in Slack, say, hey, just jump straight to from timing 11.10 seconds onwards. The first part's more related to Europe and US. It doesn't help us. So there's a lot of people that kind of help you on some things. Any questions on that? And again, this is a playbook that's about running a company, not about how to set up your office, your home office. So I just want to pivot, Mike, and then I'm open to questions because I'm conscious of time.
Yeah.
We had to make a big pivot. So obviously in Q1, we were already doing a lot of virtual marketing, but we were still doing a lot of physical events and physical outreach. That obviously changed dramatically. So what I've tried to capture here is just, and it's sort of logical, but I'll kind of step you through the slide really quickly. On the left-hand side of the screen, that's what I'd call our CXO roundtables. So we were running a series of roundtable events that were, we'd have a subject matter expert from the US or Europe come out to some part of Asia. We'd invite CXO level, CISO, CIO, CTO, CDO, in some cases CFO, and we'd pick a topic, and it wasn't about pitching Gitlab, it's around, how do you balance, innovation and digital transformation with security, or how do you measure the return on investment from your investments that you've made in your DevOps organization, or what are pitfalls of, and where are we learning from digital transformation projects and why are they failing? So anyway, there'd be a given topic and then we'd talk about that. But what I'm trying to say is on the top left is an example of the ones that we ran just in February. It seems a long time ago, in Sydney, Melbourne, Singapore, where we had those people in the room. And then the bottom left is the ones we've run over the last 3 to 4 weeks. So we were able to pivot in the space of about 3 weeks from an online CXO roundtable to an virtual. And we've had higher participation and we've generated more leads from our virtual events than we did from the physical events. The top right, the midpoint one, which looks like people with a brick wall behind them, that's that's one of my Korean sales reps and his solution architect. A different format, that closer Zoom one-on-one doesn't work so well in Korea. They like to see more like a fireside chat where they can have 200 plus people logging in and asking questions, and they manage and facilitate the discussion there. You'll see the Telstra Ventures, they're an investor in Gitlab. We've reached out to all our investors and seeing how they can help us leverage with either other portfolio companies or their own C-level contacts. We sponsored the Girls in Tech virtual event, and that's what you see down the bottom. We recently hired a solution architect that has a huge experience in machine learning and AI and data science, and she presented and ran a workshop at the Girls in Tech forum. The next column where you see some of the Japanese and Korean writing, I did a relaunch during COVID because I thought it was a great time to relaunch Gitlab within our investments that we've made to grow in the region. We've got a great amount of coverage in both Korea, Japan, Singapore, Australia. And the last piece you see there on the right, Atlassian. So Atlassian's a main competitor for us. We compete, but we also cooperate with Atlassian because all our tools are natively integrated with the Atlassian suite. But my point there is, for me to get coverage as a very small company, I have to, or I want to be associated in a headline with Atlassian or Microsoft, which are my main 2 competitors. So I'm not frightened to, but I have to be able to make sure I'm very crisp in why I'm mentioning a competitor and how are we different. But we get far more airplay if I can link Gitlab with Atlassian or Microsoft than pretending they're a competitor that doesn't exist. So the reason I say that is, if you're in an industry that you're disrupting a major player, don't be frightened to try and get if you're confident in your offering and you're confident in what your solution can do, don't be frightened to connect yourself to them, not in a disparaging way, but to align with some of the messaging that they're taking in market. But you need to be very crisp in where and why you're different, or where and why you add value to the Atlassian customer base, for example. But by doing that, we've got very extensive coverage in particularly Australia and New Zealand, where Atlassian's very strong. So I'm going to stop there, Mike. That was my last slide. And
cool. So I've got a couple of quick questions. That's fantastic. Oh, I love that. That's awesome. You guys aren't floated yet, are you?
No. So we're pre-IPO.
When do I get shares?
When do I?
So I remember going through your remote, your sales handbook, or the sales part of the handbook, and it spoke about the tempo that you run. And I love the concept of sales tempo and how that works on a daily, weekly basis.
Yeah.
Do you want to sort of talk through how you run the sales reps, or how the sales managers run the sales reps, what your expectations are of them every month?
Yeah, we're no different from any, if you look at the sales and the solution architect and the channel side, we have the same cadence and same discipline, whether they're in an office or not. I don't need to have people sitting in a room.
But I think the important point to note here is that a lot of the people on the call are fairly new startups. Okay. And so they may not have developed that. I mean, you and I have been through 30 years of sales discipline, sales tempo. Maybe they haven't developed that. So it's probably worth going back to.
Okay. So one thing I didn't put it here, but for those that maybe are not so experienced with sales and marketing and sales in particular, there's a really good newsletter and website that's free for you to subscribe to called Sales Hacker. They also have a good following on LinkedIn, so I'd encourage you to go out to that. Even with 30 years of experience in the tech business for sales that I have, I still read and learn and find new things from Sales Hacker on a weekly, daily basis that I try and incorporate in the business. So go out there and have a look at that. Look, at the end of the day, sales is science and art. The science piece is you need to have a cadence, discipline, metrics, and an expectation around how you qualify an opportunity or identify an opportunity, qualify it. You need to have particular sales stages with clear criteria that they move from a discovery into maybe a tech evaluation, into a proof of value, or into a understanding the decision criteria, moving into a negotiation and the paper process and closing. And every salesperson should be able to articulate which part of the sales stage they're at. They should know what steps they need to go that they needed to go through in terms of moving from one stage to the next stage. You need to have a cadence that you're reviewing that. It can be weekly, fortnightly. You can decide.
What is it for your team? How do you manage it with your team?
I run weekly at the moment, a weekly review. We don't review every deal. Typically, the way you want to split it is there's a certain amount of smaller deals where there's volume that you can make an estimate based on historical close rates or win rates, and you get a commitment to what I call the volume. And then you've typically got some larger deals that are binary. They're either going to close or not close, and they're the ones that you probably spend more time reviewing the status and the help needed and the progress, and are they moving through the pipeline. And then the raw number you don't get into on the volume piece. You just say that's your commitment. You manage the ins and outs of that volume aspect, but I will help you and really want to understand that the larger deals, because they can be material in terms of the outcome that you're going to get. You need to, so there's the science aspect to it, which is rigor, discipline, and you want to ask questions that are not, this is my style, some people are different. It's not an interrogation. It's a discovery of the possible obstacles, hurdles, risks, things that the rep may be blinded because they're so deep in with the customer that you're helping them look at other ways or angles to make sure that they're assured of bringing that deal home. And so again, it's not an interrogation of their intelligence around, have they checked if there's budget? Are they engaging with, person X? Or that's table stakes. But really ask things like, well, if we were to be here 2 days after or a day after we lost the deal, what are the things that you would be what are the things we'd be capturing on how that happened? But you want to be asking that 90 days out before the deal closes, not the day after you lose the deal. So
you're doing a pre-mortem, essentially.
You do a lot of pre-mortems. You do a lot of discovery. You do a lot of what-ifs. You do a lot of role plays. You want your reps to make mistakes in front of you, not in front of the customer. So anyone that's not comfortable stepping through their pitch and their plan and their sales strategy with you, I'd get nervous about, because you want them to make mistakes and get inputs prior to being in front of the customer. You don't want them to learn that in front of the customer. So that's the science piece. The art piece is you've just got to use your own intuition, and you've got to be a bit creative around, yourself. Every time you make are they really telling you the truth? Is there something else going on? Have you done your own research? I mean, very simple things. You know, I get told lots of stuff, and I can find out on Google whether that's actually the case. Or,
Yeah.
you know,
The question is, do they actually know what the truth is? Are they actually self-aware enough to know if they've got it right or not?
Exactly. So here, I'll give you a really, really simple example. Okay, so we closed a deal with M1 in Singapore recently. The initial deal was with a small the initial meeting was with a very small development team. We were talking about a deal for about 15K. The guy that was going to be making the decision on that project purchase reported to someone, reported to the CDO. During that meeting, they mentioned that the CDO had a digital transformation agenda. During the meeting, I looked up LinkedIn. I found that it was a guy that was a former executive at Telstra. I knew him through a friend of a friend. We eventually got to the CDO. We got a copy of his digital transformation priorities. We got a copy of what he presented to the board. And that deal turned from a 15K to 150K in about 3 weeks. Because all of a sudden we were aligning at the right level in the organization to be strategic for the outcomes that CDO was delivering. And that's what I mean. That's the art. That's not that's not rocket science. That's just like, try to anchor yourself on the biggest pain or the biggest opportunity, because that's where the money follows the biggest problems. And you've got to understand that. Now, you can have a strategy that you're just trying to land in an account and expand later on and anchor to that big problem. That's fine. You just have to decide, are you trying to land with vision or you're trying to land and expand? And so it's a different angle, but that's the art piece.
So I think the key message I took away from there, which I think is quite interesting, is you're trying to get to the truth with the rep versus interrogating the rep or the person that's selling for you. You're both trying to jointly discover what you don't know, looking for the truth versus, you know, trying to hold them accountable, so to speak.
Yep, they're accountable.
Now, you've got a fantastic diagram, which I didn't see in the slide deck, but you showed it on our workshop that we did for the portfolio teams last year, around your playbook for how you move your customers from one segment to another. So you've got lots of free customers because they use the product, because there is a free community version of it. How do you move them from free community users to paid users, and who are the people you have to hit in that process?
Let me see if I can quickly pull it up for the team. Just bear with me 1 sec. I'll just pull it up.
Get your questions in there, people. I think we've got 15-20 minutes. I mean, I've got an hour or so afterwards, but you know, if I'm not sure what Anthony's schedule's like, but if you've got any questions, throw them in there. David Jones has got some. We'll get to those in a sec. Welcome, David. David's actually an entrepreneur. You guys should know each other if you don't now.
Hey, David.
David did Threat Metrics, which turned into $1 billion company.
Wow. Great. So look, maybe I'll just share this really quickly.
Have you got it? If you haven't got it, I can share it with the team later.
So, look, really quickly,
it's on the website, mate. Go check the handbook.
Is this the one you're talking about, Mike, or is this?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
So look, really quickly, this is, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but one of the things coming into the organization, I was trying to get my head around in collaboration with a lot of my people that had joined in the sales and marketing side. You know, who are we selling to? What are the sales plays? And then what are we trying to do with the different audiences around our messaging? And then having this kind of what I call a go-to-market playbook or a map makes it really easy for anyone involved, from solution architect, technical account management, sales, channels, marketing, that at any point we can navigate where we are on this map. And so we either are selling to new customers or installed base. If it's a new customer, typically it's a fast land and expand, get them on one feature of our product. It's a fast transaction, not a lot of negotiation. You're up against a point player, and then you can have an expand strategy once you close that deal. The other one is landing with vision, which is you're convincing a customer to adopt Gitlab as their single application development platform, and over time they'll retire Jenkins or Bitbucket or Atlassian or
So just to be clear, your product replaces how many different products? It's like 7 or 8, isn't it, or more?
No, more, 40 or 50.
Yeah, wow, I didn't realize it was that many.
And so that's that. And then obviously in the install base, throughout the year, you want to make sure they're using your product, adopting the product, getting the benefit. And therefore, if they do, we have a renewal rate in Gitlab of about 150 to 170%. So if they spent $100 last year, they'll spend 150 or 170.
So just to explain that concept for those who don't know about it. So we're talking about net negative churn essentially there, right? So every year you're growing the customer base, but you're also growing the amount of money that the customers actually spend with you.
Correct. So there's 2 ways that happens. They either add more users to the paid tier that they've purchased, or they move up to a more feature-rich tier, which costs more. So it's either one of those. In some cases, it's both. And then what we try and do is we have a message to the C level, we have a message to the VP director level, we have a message to the paid developers, the paid tiers developers, we have a message to the active contributors in the open source community, and we have a message to the broader open source users and non-users. And at any point, any sales or marketing activity, we have to be able to explain before we launch, do it, develop it, whatever you want to describe, where you're landing relative to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And for us to be successful, quite frankly, we've got to do all 5. So it's an evangelism and a push from the bottom, and it's a business case discussion from the top. And as you sandwich in there is typically when we're closing deals. So I don't know if there's any other questions.
Yeah, we had one there. So David Jones was saying we all use tools, but engineers being introverts means that, you know, that these standards are the only face-to-face interaction. I'm concerned we're not doing enough for inclusion and social health. Any practices you're working on?
Yeah, you'll see some of that. You'll see that some in the playbook. So part of the work we do around asynchronous is so there are no expectations put on people that if they want to go, you know, respond when it suits them, they can. We have a whole culture, you know, if anyone, you know, a dog's barking, a baby comes into the room, that's culturally fully acceptable. In many cases, you know, you're supposed to introduce the family member that's come into the room, that's expected. We have a whole lot of channels in Slack that are all around nothing to do with GitLab. It's just a piece of some sort of subject matter that there's a common community that people want to rally around. You know, I'll give you an example. You know, 2 weeks ago, the CEO mandated a global family day, just told the whole company to take Friday off because he was worried that some people, even though we'd asked people to balance their, you know, and worry about their mental health, that they were saying it, but no one was doing it. So we basically had a day where outside of customer support, which they staggered their days off, there was no email sent, no Slack communication, no phone calls, just mandated. That was Friday 2 weeks ago, and that you have to.
Well, why don't we do it again today? Just joking. So
there's a lot of content in there if it helps. And look, I know.
I've got a couple of quick questions for you, but we'll get to those other ones in a sec. Are you finding decision makers harder or easier to get in this environment? Are you finding decision makers harder or easier to get in the current environment?
That's a good question. I think it depends by industry. So there are some industries that are very hard hit, which we all, you know, hospitality, retail, transportation,
travel,
right? So I think if your product's higher education, you know, if your product's suited to that segment, it's a very challenging environment. So I feel for people that are in that scenario. There are other industries that are not, right? There's other industries around utilities, resource, public sector, telco, other that are not. And so I think it really depends on what industry your solution's targeted towards. I'd say two things have happened for us. And again, we're fortunate because, and again, this, I know some people are concerned. This is not a pitch for GitLab. I'm not encouraging you to go and buy GitLab. I don't think you need to use it.
You should have a look at it though. I've looked at it and used it on a project. It's great, but anyway.
I saw there's a question. Yes, the handbook contents, if you want to take that and use that as the start of what you're building for your company's processes, it's there, it's available, it's public domain. So feel free to do that. In fact, what we are looking at doing as a company is developing a free product from GitLab that makes it really easy to develop your own handbook. So that's in process at the moment. I don't know when we'll release that, but we're trying to take the handbook as a product that would be open source to make it really easy for any company to create their own version of a handbook. So that's in the works. But Mike, to answer your question, look, we're fortunate because a lot of my customers are in public sector, telco, resources, utilities, and our platform is designed for remote teams of traders, data scientists, and developers to work more effectively. So we've seen an uptick. Globally, the company grew 200% pretty much in Q1. Our Q1 runs February to April, so it's right in the COVID-19. In APAC, we grew about 400%. So, I think we're fortunate that our solution is really helping, some of the customers that are under a lot of pressure in getting product out the door.
Yeah.
Look, the one thing I'll say as well, just, and one of the angles that I've spoken about in some of that publicity that we got is most companies, I'm talking about large companies now that many of you may be selling into, many large companies had business continuity plans, but typically they covered data center redundancy, application availability, and multi-site rollover or failover.
Yeah, or maybe one office out of action, not the whole company globally.
So nearly every company, enterprise company we've dealt with, did not have 100% work from home immediate scenario in their BCP. If you've got a product that solves that or encourages or that, you're in a good space because everyone's scrambling to realize that's an ongoing future requirement is to have a BCP that factors in 100% all remote.
Yeah. So thank you. That's great. So when I look back to my sales career back at Hewlett-Packard, one of the most influential things they ever did was send me on the Miller-Hyman training, which was, for those of you who don't know, just do a quick Google search for Miller-Hyman Blue Sheet. Do you guys use something like Miller-Hyman? Is there a 2020 version of Miller-Hyman? What's your preferred?
So we use a value sales methodology. Again, it's on the handbook. Feel free to go and look at that. It's based on a company called Force Management out of the US. The people that founded and started Force Management are from a technology firm called PTC, or Parametric Technology Corporation. PTC were renowned in the 80s and 90s as having the most disciplined tech sales force. I would argue the most disciplined sales force of any industry in the world. And they have a very simple methodology called MEDIC. We've added a couple of things on that, but basically that MEDIC or MEDPIC is a series of qualifying criteria that you have to establish to close any deal. And so MEDPIC in our case stands for metrics, which is what's the company, what are they going to measure that if they purchased your service or solution can demonstrate that it's adding the value that was subscribed to it. Economic buyer, you need to know who's writing the check. That's very different from a coach or a champion in an account. Some people confuse that a lot. The decision criteria, on what basis will the customer make the decision? What's the process to make the decision? Who else needs to be involved in the decision? What's the paper process? So it's one thing to get a decision. What's the process flow through legal, procurement, finance? What do you understand how long that takes? Have you centered on the pain? Do you really know what pain you're solving at the highest order within the organization? Like I said, the biggest problems is where money flows. Who's your champion and who's the competition? And you don't have to answer them in that serial order. Any one of those pieces of information should be discovered throughout your sales engagement.
Fantastic. That's great. So a lot of that's on the sales handbook, right? I shared the sales handbook.
That's on the handbook. Now, there's some stuff that's proprietary on that to force management that we're not allowed to publish on our handbook, and you'd have to go to. But look, if you think about those things I just said with MedPick, there's nothing there that's rocket science, right? So
yeah, no, but it requires a day-to-day discipline and the thinking about it. So Jack Blair sort of asked the question: does publicising your business processes give the customers or competitors the opportunity to take advantage of this?
Yes.
Done. Next.
No. Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, all right. But the openness beats the competitive loss, right?
I've never seen anything like it. I'll be honest. Like, I'm trying to still adapt to this. I've been here 7 or 8 months, right? So I spent 23 years at HP and SAP, multi-billion-dollar companies where everything was about hiding and protecting. Look, there's 2 benefits out of it. We have a lot of information there around us versus our competition, and we get corrected all the time by our community and the competition. It's fantastic.
Yeah, at least you know.
They are actually curating our competitive sell against tools, and they're telling us where we've got a gap and it's weak. So all it's doing is strengthening. We don't take it down, we just improve it. The second thing is we publish a 12-month and a 3-year roadmap for our products. It's very obvious, and you can see, and you don't have to believe me, read TechCrunch or any of the Silicon Valley publications that focus on software. Microsoft and GitHub are following us at the moment. But the thing they don't understand is it's one thing to publish a roadmap. It's another thing to have the processes in place to execute on that commitment. Every month, month in, month out. We're now on our 93rd monthly release cycle. We haven't missed a cycle. It's so you can have it out there. So you want to be careful. If you're going to promise it or you're going to match it, you better make sure you can deliver it.
Yeah,
and so we bet. And again, it's not trying to be arrogant. It's the premise of the product we've delivered. We believe that Gitlab provides you the ability to develop and release the fastest possible release cycles the most securely than any other platform on the planet. So we have to deliver that for our own platform. So we use GitLab to develop GitLab, right? So it's a bet we're making.
So on the marketing side, is there a marketing workflow that you can recommend? Thanks, Jen. Jen Kritzer.
I'll get the name of the company that we use. I don't know what it is, but we use 2 different tools. I just don't have the name right now.
No, that's okay. If you share it with me later, I'll share it on Twitter.
That's a plugin. It's part of the Salesforce ecosystem, so it's something that's already fully integrated with Salesforce. I just forgot the name of it, and I'll get that for you. But also, if you look on the handbook and look under a section called SDR, or Sales Development Rep, that's the flow that we go through from outbound or inbound lead qualification through to sales accepted opportunity. And then there's a flow from sales accepted opportunity to close. That's all mapped and documented in the handbook. And again, you can just copy that. That's nothing that's rocket science.
Fantastic. Just a quick one. How do you manage your community channel edition? Do you have dedicated community managers or?
Yeah, we do. So we have a combination of a board that is from the community, and that's publicly available on our website. If you click on community, I think it's GitLab community board, we have a number of board members that are not GitLab employees, and then we have members that are GitLab employees, and they're the ones that make the decisions, again, that are publicly available on what gets included or doesn't get included in a release and or contributed into the open source platform, the core community platform.
Fantastic. I'm mindful that we're coming up to 10 o'clock, and I really appreciate your time. Is there any last questions? Anybody want to punch any last questions out just before we hit the pause button? Going. See how quickly they can type. I think we've missed it. Mate, I really want to thank you again. It's been a pleasure. I learned so much again, and it was a pleasure working with you 25 years ago. And some things don't change, and you've obviously kept that ethos up. On behalf of the community here, we'll share this out on Twitter once we've done a little bit of editing, and on LinkedIn as well. On behalf of all the community, I really appreciate your time and really appreciate you being so open about what makes everything work and tick. Everybody go have a try of his product. It's actually pretty good. We've used it for a couple of projects. So we put a ventilator together on it a couple of months ago, 6 weeks ago or so. So that was good. Mate, thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Mike, and I wish everyone on the call all the success with their ventures. So you know, fascinated, and I've come from a big corporate world, so I'm really impressed by the path that many of your profile companies are taking.
I mean, Anthony might be available for a little bit of mentoring for some select high growth companies. He's told me that he might be looking for some opportunities there for you know, maybe investment. I don't know, maybe not investments. I don't know, but looking to get closer into that at some point. Yeah. So look, anyway, thanks again.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a great day, everybody. See you later.
Bye.